Bezos, and I'm an instructional designer here in the Office of Distance Education. Our topic today is creating an accessible Word document, and we're going to focus primarily on Word, although we will talk about accessibility more broadly. So over the next 30 to 40 minutes or so, I'm hoping to accomplish the things that you see there on the screen. Make sure we have a common understanding of what accessibility is and why it's important. Touch briefly on our best practices that we've developed for online courses, and then we'll spend the rest of our time actually looking at a Word document, and I'll go over some different tools and techniques that are inside of Microsoft Word that you can utilize. So I want to start with a question for all of you, just to give me a sense of where everyone's at. And you can put that in the chat or you can speak it, but I would like to hear how you define accessible. I see a couple people are typing. Here we go. Many different learning styles can benefit. Okay. What else? Let's hear from other people. Either through the microphone, which make sure you've clicked the little picture of a microphone at the top of your computer screen so that it's green, or through the chat. How do you define accessible? Available to all. That's good. I like that. People with disabilities can access content. Excellent. All right. I think one more is typing, so we'll give them a second. That's good. That's a little more detailed there, MJ. It reaches many different types of learners and it's easy for them. So let's dive into this a little bit. I pulled a fairly common definition that's being used a good bit, and that's a person with a disability is afforded the opportunity to acquire the same information, to engage in the same interactions, and to enjoy the same services as a person without a disability. So to kind of say that again, that the same information, interactions, and services as a person without a disability in an equally effective, equally integrated, and substantially equivalent ease of use. Um, so that is what you all were saying there in the chat. The idea that we're trying to make sure that everyone can participate as equally as possible in terms of interacting with the content, demonstrating their learning, and being engaged with the process. Now, this definition I shared with you, it comes from a resolution agreement between the U.S. Office of Civil Rights and the South Carolina Technical College system. And that agreement was reached in February of 2013. So this has been a very common definition that's been used. Why do we worry about this? Well, first off, it's the law. You see the two laws with a very brief description there. We, as an institution here at Westchester, get federal money, which means we are required to make sure that our teaching is accessible to the folks that are in our courses and that our public-facing documentation like the website is accessible for those that need to interact with it. But the law, I mean, like, I know the law is important, but sometimes it's kind of like, oh, we have to do it. But accessibility is a little more important than just that here at Westchester. As you can see, I've pulled a line from our mission statement that we're committed to providing access and high quality education. And then if you look at our vision statement, this is another line that I pulled out of that instructors and staff are going to create a supportive learning environment. And part of being supportive is making sure that our items are accessible. And then finally, the longest quote that I pulled from the Westchester University value statement, that we as an institution want a diverse student body, which includes students with disabilities or other barriers to accessing information, that we're going to try to provide the best quality experience that we can and in a way that is productive and supportive And then further down there, one of our values is equity. So uh, this idea of accessibility and making sure that materials can be accessed here in Westchester goes way beyond just because we have to do it because of the law. It really is part of what we as an institution say we're going to be about. So that was just some basic introduction to accessibility and what it means to be doing that here at Westchester. And the Office of Distance Education has developed a checklist of best practices specific to online courses that we encourage faculty who are teaching online to follow. And I've pulled out the ones from that list that are relevant to Microsoft Word documents today. So let's touch on those just briefly. And I think they all come from the Creating Course Materials section of our checklist. So the first one, and I'm definitely going to go into this one in more detail when we're in Word, is using the style toolbar, which I have a picture of on the screen. If you were like me prior to being made aware that this was important, you probably ignored it. I always ignored it. I didn't think it had any value. Well, then I found out it is actually somewhat important. And it's important for kind of identifying pieces of information as to what they are. And the way they do that primarily is through something called the heading structure. And I believe there's 6 of them, heading 1 through 6. There might be 5, I can't remember. But they're set up in such a way that they're like an outline. So if you have a document like a syllabus that has 3 major headings, those major headings would be identified with the heading 1 option, which if I get the arrow, heading 1 is right here. And then let's say under one of those major headings you had 2 subpoints. Those subpoints would be identified with the heading 2, and so on and so forth moving down the line, just like an outline. And the reason this is important is because if someone who uses a program called a screen reader, which will read what's on a computer screen, those headings help that student get an overview of the document and also allow them to skip to certain portions within the document. So syllabi tend to be rather long documents. If you use this heading structure, it allows a student to get to the parts that they want without having to sit and listen through the whole thing. So that's one reason why this is valuable. This heading structure is common on websites as well, and there's a formatting tool in Desire to Learn that lets you do that as well. Okay, hyperlink text that clearly indicates link destination. So I've kind of demonstrated good and bad there on the screen, and I'm just going to read it kind of similarly to how a screen reader might read it so that you understand why it's important. The Office of Distance Education link best practices for creating an accessible online course. That was the good one. Now let me read the bad one. Link, click here for the Office of Distance Education best practices for creating an accessible online course, or go to link http://wcupa.edu/distanceed/BLA. You get the point there. MJ, the structure listed in the word is not necessarily already in the correct order, but if you think 1, 2, 3, etc., that is the order. And I'm going to show you like a concrete example when we get into Word. I just wanted to lay the foundation there. So hyperlinks, especially digitally, it's always good to make sure you have a description that is the link rather than saying click here or providing the actual written out URL. If you're going to print a document, obviously doing the first version isn't as accessible in that format because you can't actually click on the link there. So you do have to kind of keep that in mind as you're developing some of your documentation that might be used both physically and digitally. But from a digital standpoint, it's always better to do the first one that you see up there on the screen. Okay. Providing short text descriptions of any image-based content. So look at what I have on the screen here, the text. Read that, and we're going to see how well I did. Yeah, I think you've had a chance to read it. So I'm going to go to the next slide now, and we'll see how well I did. So tell me either with your microphone or in the chat, did I do a pretty good job of describing what's going on there? even though you couldn't see the picture? Thank you. Good. I hope so. And I was trying to convey there this idea that folks that have visual challenges may not necessarily be able to see the images that you're incorporating. So it's important that you have some extra description there as well. And you can do that through captions or a tool called alt tags. And we'll touch on alt tags when we get into Word. Okay. I really think this one is fairly straightforward, but just in case someone would like me to read it, um, using large, bold fonts on uncluttered pages with clear backgrounds is a really good thing to do from an accessibility standpoint. If you're doing PowerPoint, I know this is not a PowerPoint webinar, but 18-point font is about as small as you ever want to go and present that in a classroom. If you go smaller than that, it's not, first off, you probably have too much text on the slide, but two, it's also very difficult to read. So clear, uncluttered, bold, large, significant fonts are the way to go. Color is another thing to keep in mind. You want to make sure that your color combinations can be read by people who have color blindness, and this website that I have listed here is a good one for double checking that. If you stick with black and white, you usually do well. But one other thing I want to say about this is sometimes people will use color to highlight important sections. It's important that you do some other style change when making a change like that to highlight it. So don't just use a color and a bold, or a color and an underline, or a color and a font change, or something else, because color isn't always the best way to convey that this is important information. Okay, so in your writing, when you're writing for students, uh, try to avoid the acronyms and the jargon. And this one can be tough sometimes because I've at least noticed a lot of faculty like to abbreviate days because they're trying to make syllabi that are nice and compact and tight from a printing it out standpoint. In the digital environment, length isn't as important because they're in theory not going to print it out. So you can kind of see the difference. Now, if you want to simulate this, I'm going to read it again, kind of like a screen reader might. So if you want to, you can close your eyes and just listen and see which one of these two is easier to understand right off the bat. So here we go. I'm going to do the bad one first. Office hours are M, T, and R from 6 to 8 p.m. Go to the ODE to get the CAPC, DE, CERT. Let me read the good one. Office hours are Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Go to the Office of Distance Education to get the Curriculum and Academic Policies Council Distance Education Certification. So I hope you can kind of see how, while when we look at it, we understand what's going on. If you have to listen to it, it may be more challenging when you use jargon and abbreviations and things like that. All right, I think this is our last one, and we'll move into Microsoft Word. So I'm actually going to my 10th, what is it, 10th year reunion at my alma mater this weekend, which is William and Mary. And I'm using this as a negative example. The William and Mary Triathlon is probably not relevant to any of you if you do not have a connection to that institution. So that was probably a poor example. So just making sure I'm thinking about my audience and making sure that the examples that I'm using are going to connect with them. Questions about anything I have covered so far? Someone is typing. No, excellent. That's what I like to see. All right, we're going to switch over to Microsoft Word now. So you should see a Microsoft Word screen with a little bit of language on it. And I'm just going to work through some of the different options. And if you've been watching my video at all, I'm shifting to another screen. So if I'm not looking right at it, don't get weirded out. All right, so we're going to start with those styles that we were talking about. And it really is an outline structure. So if this is your title of your document, you can type it out and then highlight it and find the option in the styles bar that's title. Now, when you use these style options, they come with preset sizes, colors, fonts, all that. You can change it. You can change the defaults, and you can change it after you've made the style selection. So in this case, I don't want my title to be that large. I can shrink it down. But when I click on the word title, it still is listed in the styles bar as a title. So you almost want to put these styles onto your text soon, and then you can go in and manipulate the fonts and colors and all of that. So I put a title in, and I might have my first major heading and I would highlight it, and I would go heading 1. Well, I don't want that to be blue. I want it to be black, and I don't want it to be that big, so I'll shrink it down. And maybe I want it underlined, and maybe I want a totally different font. I can make those changes, and when I click on the text, it still says heading 1. And that's the important part, that it's listed as a style of heading 1. Now, you may notice that there's a little tiny guy right there, that little arrow. Here's what that will do. Let me do my second major heading. Highlight that with a heading 1. Let's see what that question was. I'm assuming what you're saying is if I were to add a title somewhere else and I highlight that and select title, the format would still result, like, it still goes back to whatever the default is in the program. And you can change the default. I'm going to show you that in a second. So notice my first major heading is the font changes that I made, but when I did my second major heading and selected it as heading 1, it reverted back to my default setting. So I would have to go back through and change that and change the size, and that can get kind of annoying. I mean, obviously it gets annoying having to go through all those process. So what you can do with your headings is if you right click on one of them, you can update the heading to match your current selection. So if this is what I want to be my heading 1 style, I can right click, update heading 1 to match selection, and then that becomes my default. So I hope that answers your question there, MJ. Yeah. So I definitely encourage that if you have a particular style or that you like to use when you're doing your documents, to go ahead and adjust your presets, your defaults in the styles tool. Now, I put 2 major headings in, both listed as a heading 1, which is what they are, because remember it's an outline style. So let me demonstrate. So this would be first heading subtopic 1. I would highlight this and it would become a heading 2. And then if under that there was a first heading subtopic 2, this would also be a heading 2. And then if I went, I cannot type at the moment. Let's get my key. First heading subtopic 1, what is it? Or maybe subtopic 1, section 1. That would then become a heading 3. Now, I can type normal text under here just fine. So you could have kind of paragraphs. These are just meant to be headings. And whoops, this one came out as a heading 2. So I would just click on normal and it goes back down there. So I've kind of created a little structure there for you to see. Now that arrow that I was talking about, if I wanted to, I can click that little arrow and have it shrink whatever's part of that section. So or I can click it again and open it up. So I can kind of get a sense of looking at an outline without having to read all the little bits and pieces that are in between there. So again, like if I wanted to shrink my heading subtopic 1, subsection 1, I could do that. So that's something to keep in mind. And the other thing, when I show you the navigation panel, you can actually drag and drop these sections and change the order. So by putting this heading structure in place, it really allows you to very easily kind of move pieces around and focus on areas that you need to. That indentation option is with the heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, etc. I don't know if you can do it with everything. Like title does not have that option. Something else to mention with the styles bar um, is that you will only see heading options available that you're supposed to start with. So my heading 3 and heading 4 didn't appear in the styles bar until after I had created a heading 1 and a heading 2, and then it made heading 3 available. So if you first get into Word and you don't see them right away, that's why. They're still there. It's just waiting for you to actually create something with a heading 1 and a heading 2. What else am I missing on headings? I'm going to get to the view pane later. So we'll save the rest of that for now. I think I got headings taken care of pretty well. I'd have to double check the Mac to see how that works because Microsoft things on Mac are always a little different. Um, so that's just something to keep in mind. But I can check on that for you, Elizabeth, because they do there is some of the accessibility features that are there. So I'll hold on to that one and I'll get back to you on that. All right, so let's talk briefly about creating hyperlinks. This is actually really easy to do. So I have my sentence like I am going to William and Mary's homecoming. Yay. And I want to make the William and Mary a link to their web page. So I would highlight the text and you can go up to the Insert tab and find the hyperlink button, but that's a lot of kind of finding stuff. What I like to do on my PC is just use the quick key, which is you hold down the control key and you tap the K key. I think on a Mac it's Command K. And that brings up this little box and there's an address spot down at the bottom and I can just put in the URL and click OK and it's going to turn that into a hyperlink. So anything that has a URL address, you can copy the URL, highlight your text, go Control K, and put in the hyperlink. Usually I paste it. That was not a good thing to. So I have a couple popping up right now because I've used them already. But that's how you create hyperlinks. If you haven't learned how to do that, I would encourage you to practice that. It's very easy to do, and then you'll be meeting that best practice. So that's pretty easy. Moving on. Okay, one thing that I notice a lot, especially in syllabi, is grading charts. And one, like where they list the letter grade and the corresponding numerical average. One thing to keep in mind with charts is that a screen reader will read it based on the tab order. So when I tab this chart, it went from A to B, from left to right. So if you were going to listen to that, it would say A, B, 90 to 100, 80 to 89, C, D, 70 to 79, 60 to 60. That's hard to kind of figure out when you're listening to. So it's better to make sure that your chart is set up in such a way where it goes A is like that, and then B. So I'm hopefully you see how I'm changing this here. That's a much better setup than, because when it reads, it'll go A, 90 to 100, B, 80 to 89. That comes through much clearer. So just be attentive to that with your charts. It's an easy thing to check with by clicking in the first box and tabbing over. The other thing about charts that I didn't do here is I didn't put column headers on it, which I probably should have done to help faculty or help students understand what the different parts are. So that's something else to consider, that you would say letter grade and then average equivalent, I don't know, average equivalence or averages that correspond to that letter grade, something along those lines. Okay. Images and adding descriptions. You can put a caption like I did when I was doing the demonstration earlier, but something else that you can do is called alt tags or alternative tags. And in Word, if you were right click on an image, there's some different formatting options. What I usually select is Format Picture, and that opens up a brand new pane on the right-hand side. And then if I never can remember which picture it is, so I just start clicking until I find the one that says alt text. So here it says alt text. So I'm going to open that up. And then what I do in the title box is I just type a brief description of the image. So if it's got text like it does here, I usually type the text first, and then I might say like logo. And so what I've done there is I have put a textual description that lives underneath the picture for anyone using a screen reader. So the screen reader would actually read that text. It would say image or picture, depending on the screen reader, WCU Westchester University logo. So someone listening would have a sense of what that is. You can also do alt text on tables. So if I go to table properties, there's an alt text tab here where you can put a title and description in for the table. And you do want to be careful when using images of information, pictures of information, that the student can access that information. For example, if you scan a text document to PDF and it's a picture of the text document, a student who uses a screen reader would not be able to read that information because the computer would say picture. The alt tag says nothing. The student's stuck there. So you just want to be attentive to that when you're using pictures to try to convey information like charts or graphs or things of that nature. You just want to be careful about that. Maybe you include a caption, maybe you use the alt tag or some combination of both. Okay, view and navigation pane. So the current version of Word, if you go to the View tab, there's an option for something called the navigation pane, which I'm going to go ahead and turn on. And what that's doing is showing me my heading structure. So you can see here, first major heading subtopic, first heading subtopic, whatever, I couldn't say it right earlier. And then so you can kind of see how the indentation and the outline is going. Let's say I start writing my paper and I realize, or my syllabus, and I realize I want to move a section. This first heading subtopic, I don't want that there. I want it to be first. You can just drag it and it's going to automatically move it on your document. So if I want this first heading to actually be part of that, I can just drag it and it's going to move it. So from an organizing standpoint, I really like that. When I discovered that, I was like, whoa, that totally makes it worthwhile, because then I can just kind of get it all out. And as long as I've been using my heading structure, I can start moving pieces around very quickly to make more sense. In a syllabus, I think that's a great thing because you can kind of mix and move as you need to. So I really like that. So again, that's on the View tab and it's the navigation pane. All right, so this next one may not be available on the Mac, Elizabeth, so I'm just giving you a heads up. Word and PDF, but Word, since we're talking about that today, has an accessibility checker, something that will kind of look for things in your document to make sure it makes sense. And you access that on the File tab. So let me go back. File tab is the first one here. And I have a bunch of menu options and a couple document things here, but we're going to go to the one that says Inspect Document. I'm going to click that giant box, and there's a couple different things, but right there in the middle is the one that I want. Check accessibility. So I'm going to click that, and it's going to give me a report that popped up over here on the right-hand side. And it's going to list out any errors, and if I click on it, it'll take me right to that particular error. And it says I don't have any alt text for this table, which depending on the table, I might not need it. The other thing it's saying is there's no header row for this table, which is accurate, so I need to fix that. And then things where it's not as sure about, it usually lists those as warnings. So let me see if I can get it to, yep. So I just created a new problem for myself, which appears often when using this, and that's repeated blank characters. If you use spaces a lot, you may get something like this, where it says repeated blank characters, 11 characters. So if I click on that, it's going to show me where it is, and I should be able to just get rid of those until it goes away. The issue there is that sometimes screen readers will read blank spaces because they think they're important. Um, so then you could get a situation where it says creating hyperlinks, space, 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 space. That can get really annoying. I mean, I just found that annoying. So that's something else to keep in mind. The checker will only work on very modern versions of Word. So if you have an older version of Word, it may not run correctly, or you're trying to analyze an older version of a Word document. But the university provides the most current version of Office for free, so you can just go download it and that solves your problem if you're on a PC. I'll have to double check the Mac again to see how that works out. One last thing, I think most of you know how to do this, but when you save a document and you go File, Save As, there's an option here where you can change the type of file. If you have used heading structure in your document and you save it, the Microsoft Word document as a PDF file, it will keep that heading structure in place. So that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're saving to PDF and sending PDF files to students, to make sure that you've used that heading structure, because that will make that document accessible. Questions about what I showed you today in Word before I return to the PowerPoint and end our webinar today? I think I'm running 2016. Um, I'll have to double check that. I think where do I find that? Oh, they keep moving buttons on me. I don't remember where I find that information. I'll double check. I know mine's pretty current. Um, so that's something to keep in mind. Seeing that that was the only question, I'm gonna flip back over to the presentation. Let's make this go away. So one of the reasons I did this webinar today is awareness. I know for me, I had no clue about styles until I watched a presentation that showed it to me. So I would encourage you to, I mean, you all have become aware now. Um, Most of these things are little things to do. They're easy things to do, but they do take kind of conscious thought to go, oh yeah, I should do that. Um, and so I would encourage you to see if you can start working on doing some of these things moving forward with anything else, with things that you create for students moving into the future. And then as things come up, you can start to correct them over time, because this can be somewhat daunting if you think about all the things you've created there. You have to start working on updating. But um, the more you can do up front and ahead of time, the better off you will be when you eventually get a student who is going to need these accommodations. It's better to be able to say, hey, I already took care of most of it. Let me just do these last two things, than to go, oh my gosh, I need to do all my documents in the next 2 weeks before courses start. We actually had an instance with one of our training sessions where somebody asked, is this accessible because I need it? And because we'd been working on it, we were able to say, yes, it is. We just have a couple little things we need to tweak. I can definitely send you the Word document. This whole presentation will be available on YouTube by the end of today. Um, I don't know if that helps you or not. I'm happy to send you most of the PowerPoint deck. Um, we have our checklist lists these things off, not necessarily specific to Word, but I can send you that as well to help. So hopefully that helps you there. The last thing I would say to everybody is, like, help spread the word about this. They're little things that they make a big difference, and they help the institution continue to be forward-looking and prepared, and making it a better environment for everybody. So that's some accessibility features in Word in 40 minutes, less than that, since I did the logistics at the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off.